Well, welcome to Ellis Park at this quite dramatic moment here. Nelson Mandela, the President of South Africa, fully clad in the rugby jersey with a number 6 on its back, and the two great rivals of Southern Hemisphere rugby, New Zealand and South Africa, out in the middle at Ellis Park. Mandela just lifting his cap to the 62,000 people that have crammed into the stadium. Very intimidating, but South Africa took their position right up. So the kick-off, it's a short one, it doesn't carry 10 metres. No short line out there, but Jones, but this is Francois Pinard. Once again, good support. The crowd will tell you if it's over. Mention of the play. Straight through again. He's got lots of time. Can he get it straight? Yes, he's got it. Jean de Villiers does. Now to stretch it. The drop. Has he got it? Yes, it's over.
Just a year before winning the 1995 Rugby World Cup, South Africa had conducted its first democratic elections, with Nelson Mandela becoming its first black president. It was a glorious yet testing time for the country, one of major adjustments and pivotal change, and rugby wasn't particularly popular amongst the majority of the new South Africa. Mandela, in what at the time was considered a major political gamble, decided to support the Springbok emblem and team, seeing rugby not as a symbol of oppression and division, but one that could potentially unify the nation. Wearing the number 6 Springbok jersey, Mandela visited the change room before the World Cup final, and the team came out stronger than ever before. Later that afternoon, Mandela stood alongside a celebrating nation, proud holder of the Ellis Cup, and the perception of rugby in South Africa forever changed. The country continued to unify under their new leader, and the Springboks continued their journey back to an accepted major force in world rugby. At the same time, a young Jean de Villiers was emerging as an up-and-coming Springbok great. By 22, he had travelled the world playing for the South African Sevens, won a bronze at the Commonwealth Games, and was an integral part of the under-21 team that won the 2002 Junior World Cup. Over the next 10 years, Jean would go on to become one of the world's best inside centres, playing over 50 provincial games for Western Province, more than 100 Super Rugby games for the Stormers, and a monumental 106 tests for the Springboks, making him the most capped South African centre of all time. In 2012, Jean became the 54th Springbok captain, and he has been nominated South Africa's Player of the Year twice. But Jean's career hasn't been without its misfortune. Extensive injuries have twice kept him from the ultimate prize, the Ellis Cup. And in the final game of 2014, in the twilight of his illustrious career, and with his sights set firmly on what would be his last World Cup just 10 months away, disaster struck again.
That is not good. One of the South African players stayed down.
It's going to take a while, mate. I think so. Just take the
Jean de Villiers in agony down below on the field. It looks like his left knee.
I could hear him screaming from where I was sitting.
This was the most horrific injury I've ever seen on the pitch.
I was actually watching with a bunch of mates, and all of a sudden, this collision happened, and the entire, group that I was watching were just like, oh, couldn't watch it, and couldn't watch the replays, and it was just, it just looked really bad at the time,
Everyone saw, I think, as soon as it happened, you sort of knew it was serious.
Left my drink and got up and left. I didn't even watch the replay. I knew that was it.
It happened so quickly, and immediately I knew there's something seriously wrong.
We had load shedding, so I couldn't watch the game. All of a sudden, I got all these text messages saying, "We're praying for you, we're praying for Jean," and I didn't know what was going on.
One of my sort of defining memories of the sporting year in 2014 really was hearing Jean's anguished cry. He was in there trying for a clean out, and he suddenly just sort of was propelled backwards, and then you heard this anguished scream.
We could all hear the shout, in the pavilions. I mean, it was unbelievable. I think it's the first and the last time that I've heard a shout like that coming from him.
Immediate thought that was it, career over. I've been through a lot with Jean. You know, we've played a lot of rugby together. You know, I've coached him for some time, and I know the injuries that he's been through. But that looked pretty bad. You know, second thought was, shame, he's going to miss another World Cup.
As a player that's had a number of years playing and seen similar injuries, you know what the extent could be. And of course, I think it's human nature that you fear the worst.
We spoke in the cloakroom and he said to me, he thinks it's the end. But I said to him, you know, be calm, let's see what will happen, will happen. So at that stage I was in 2 months, but to be quite honest, I thought at the end that he'll never be able to play again.
Jean nearly went home that week because his wife thought she was going into labour, and he nearly pulled out on the Thursday. And all those kind of thoughts go through your head. You think, oh, if only he had just gone home instead of played the game.
My dad phoned me from the UK, and they just gave a very short prognosis that they went for the scan. It looks like the majority of the ligaments are off, that he dislocated his patella. They would fly over together. That was the next day, and then he would go to the specialist to Spike to have a look at.
You know, there was a lot of speculation in the media as to what was really wrong with him, but you know, when he explained it, you know, it was far worse than what the people thought it was.
He was carried off, he was screaming. Rugby players get hurt all the time. You don't hear them in that much anguish, so you knew it was bad.
Suddenly, several months, World Cup, those words kind of came certainly into my focus, and I'm pretty sure came into his instantly on the field, despite the sort of agony he was going through.
So we mustn't give them opportunities.
When the paramedics got there, they gave him some Internox gas, which is basically a mixture of oxygen and some nitrous oxide that puts you in a real mellow state. And I cut off the tape in his knee.
And the first thing really was to get Jean's knee back straight. You know, we had to pop it straight and pop the kneecap back into place, and then immobilize his knee. Obviously, with that sort of dislocation, you know there's ligament damage.
And the first thing that Jean said to me, did we get the penalty? I'm serious, that was the most important thing to him.
True to his character, even in a position like that, being injured and a serious injury as well, he still had time to have a joke with the ref and with the doctor that came onto the field.
Thankfully, at that venue, they had laughing gas or Internox. So you can see him on the video sucking that laughing gas. And I think Jean probably finished most of that bottle on the field before we even got him off.
He was in relatively good spirits for what I expected. So he always cracks his few jokes, and they're not always funny, but you laugh because you don't want to make him feel bad. So, but you could see that it's a big injury, and he realizes exactly the impact and the consequence of what just happened.
He instantly thought that his career was over, full stop. Never mind Rugby World Cup, because the first thing I asked him was, did you think my Rugby World Cup is now out of the picture? And he said, no, he said, I think my career may well be out of the picture.
The moment I spoke to him, I just broke down crying. He's like, no, Poopsie, I'm fine. He's trying to like sugarcoat that it's not so bad, but I just couldn't stop crying. He just kept trying to keep me calm. He thought I saw it. He actually thought I saw it, and it wasn't pretty.
If we take a simple model, we can say this would be a right knee, and that's the outer half of your knee, that's the inner half of your knee, and that's your kneecap. So basically, we've got 4 ligaments in the knee. There's one on the outside, there's one on the inside, and inside the knee there's 2 ligaments, so-called anterior cruciate ligament, and at the back there, the posterior cruciate ligament. So what happened to John, he was hit sort of from the outside of his leg. So probably the first ligament that went was the medial ligament. Then he dislocated his kneecap, tearing another ligament on the side there, and then he tore the anterior cruciate ligament and then the posterior cruciate ligament. So he basically tore 3 out of the 4 ligaments in his knee, plus sustaining a dislocation of his kneecap.
You must realize that your knee is a big joint. So his knee was swollen up because his VMO, his vastus medialis origin, the muscle, it tore off the bone. So there was a sack of blood hanging there, and there was a big lump where the muscle pulled up. And then we later found out that he tore his hamstring at the top and at the bottom. So, I mean, pain-wise, I think it would be close to 10.
In my experience, this degree of injury is very seldom seen in rugby. in a way, it's more common to see this sort of thing in motorbike accidents.
What the doctors sometimes do, instead of weakening the knee by maybe taking another part of the knee to use as the ligament, they sometimes just put in a replacement or a fake ligament. So yeah, I've also had that done, and that's what he was debating, whether he should have either patella tendon or hamstring tendon used or the fake ligaments.
The problem with artificial ligaments, they're the strongest at the moment they put in, and then will just get weak over time. So I'm not a big believer in artificial ligaments, but I think in this case, in an older rugby player who's got a real big goal to play within about 6 months, we really had no other choice.
It's actually funny how these things happen. They had a penalty, kicked it over, and behind the post we decided that we're going to go with a different kickoff to the previous ones in the game. So we kicked off left rather than kicking in front of the forwards. We kicked off to the left. Lewazim Vovu, competed for the ball, but he sort of missed it, went through. And I was, Jan Safonten and myself, we were sort of on the ball trying to steal it. It's weird, it all happens within 1-2 seconds, but there was like a moment where, I'm there trying to steal it, and you realize you're in a difficult position now, you're in a position that you don't want to be in, and then it just goes, then it just happens. You hear it, you feel it in your body, and immediately I just expected the worst. I knew that it was bad. That force was just too much and I couldn't handle it. So it was just very, very uncomfortable, and basically my foot next to my ear. You never go onto a rugby field thinking that you're going to get injured. But I suppose the nature of our sport is that, there's always that risk that that something can happen.
Jean de Villiers.
Jean was born into the de Villiers family on a searingly hot February morning in 1981 in the Western Cape town of Paarl, South Africa. With Jean's father being a provincial rugby player himself, Jean's entrance into rugby was nothing short of a baptism of fire, playing his first game of rugby alongside his brother at the age of 5. He was enrolled at Paarl Gymnasium Primary, famous for breeding South African rugby greats, and he immediately stood out as a potential future Springbok.
Well, the first time I think he really caught my attention was when he was in the primary school. He fought hard to achieve, and he did it honestly.
Jean continued to play top-level schoolboy rugby, representing his country in the under-19 national side for 2 consecutive years.
I think rugby was like a language he understood. He did things instinctively and that he felt was right, and it worked.
In his last year at high school, a routine practice went wrong when Jean twisted his leg, dislocating his patella. The injury was severe, keeping him off the field for 6 months. This was not the last time Jean would travel the lonely road to recovery.
He's had this history of like the World Cup boogie, where he's always seemed to pick up an injury in a World Cup year, which has been a big factor for him.
The right shoulder, he's had that Bankard lesion there. He's had the AC joint sprain. He's had a sternocostal lesion there. The left side, he's had his biceps rupture, his long thoracic nerve injury that was also around the World Cup injury. He's had bilateral adductor strains. He's had the patellar dislocation on the right with his lateral collateral sprain. He's also had the patellar dislocation on this side that he's injured now with reconstructive surgery there on the PCL and the MCL. He's had a syndesmosis injury on his right ankle. He's had his scapulonate ligament injury on the left wrist. The right wrist, he's also had an injury, his facet joint syndrome that's ongoing of his lower back.
Whenever he's doing really well and in a good position, he always tends to get an injury, and to be captain of your country and then get an injury was another one of those big blows for him.
Rugby is a really brutal sport. It's a massive collision sport.
There's no denying the physicality of rugby. The combination of intense daily training and massive weekly impacts eventually takes its toll. The rugby season has lengthened, resulting in a professional player having very little rest time, and it's not uncommon for players to carry injuries from season to season. Managing these injuries within the narrowing time frame in which a player can compete is a delicate process. Jean is no stranger to this. With his first injury at schoolboy level, it was injury management from the very beginning. But the real issue with Jean is timing. His 2002 debut for the senior Springboks ended after just 5 minutes, another crippling knee injury ruling him out for 8 months. Just a year later, his 2003 World Cup hopes were smashed along with his shoulder in a warm-up game. Having fought his way back from that intense physical and mental disappointment, he earned selection for the 2007 Rugby World Cup winning squad, only to be ruled out with a ruptured bicep in the very first match of the campaign.
My first test match, up until that stage, from a purely rugby point of view, I had it pretty easy throughout my life. At school, playing all the representative sides from provincial to national, and getting it pretty easy. And then at 21, getting a Springbok cap, I had one Currie Cup game behind my name. No Super Rugby experience, one Currie Cup game, and I got selected for the Springbok. So, that was pretty unheard of. And then I got injured that game as well. And for the first time, I really had to work hard, or much harder than other people, to get back into it. And I think there I learned a lot about myself and what you can do and how far you can push yourself.
With any big injury, it's always psychological, and it doesn't matter if you come back from a broken leg or a shoulder op or a knee op. It's actually physically getting tackled out in the training paddock. It's being able to, see how quick you are, how you can step again. All those things, all mental blocks. You can see it immediately on any player when they come back. The first couple of months, they got like a little limp, and it's not because of the physical problems, because of the mental problems. They've got like a mental block. He'll do the rehab, he'll get the leg right, but he's only got probably about a month or two of actually physically running on the field, getting tackled, sidestepping, explosive running, and that's the mental block that he's going to have to get through.
There will be certain benefits to him having an enforced layoff. I think he'll actually almost, other parts of his body in a sense will almost be able to sort of refresh, which can be a positive. He's not going through the wear and tear and the brutal grind of Super Rugby in the first half of the year, which takes a tremendous sort of attritional toll on rugby players. And we see the number of players who succumb to long-term injuries during Super Rugby.
If you look at ligaments like outside the knee, like the medial ligament that Jean has torn, it heals pretty quickly, probably within about 3 months. We didn't use autograft for his anterior posterior cruciate ligaments. We used artificial ligaments that does not need to heal. So in his case, the progress is really dependent on his medial ligament, which should heal relatively quickly. So I'm optimistic that by 4 to 5 months, you will be able to run full out and take contact too.
Do you think Jean will make it back in time for this year's World Cup?
I think it's at this stage not possible for me to give an answer to that. We don't really have any experience of what we did to Jean. So in a way, we have to see it a little bit as an experimental case. And because of that, I think we have to go with the flow and see what happens. But so far, the flow is good.
Yeah, I've had that question once or twice before. It's, these days, whenever I meet someone or bump into someone, the first question is always, how are you doing? Will you be ready?
To be able to play the World Cup, it's not return to play, it's return to form. And for Jean, it's particularly important to him. He wants to make an impact when he's in the team, not just as a leader, but as a player on the pitch.
I think he'll be man enough to say, listen, I've tried, I've given everything, it's not going to work, call it a day.
We've programmed it, we've looked at the time frames. There is a possibility that he can be ready, and we're going to do everything in our powers to get him ready for the World Cup.
He's got everything going for him. So I believe he'll be right, and I believe that our team needs him, and I do believe that we'll win the World Cup with him.
Look, it's a lot of people say that it's impossible, you know, but then they don't know Jean de Villiers. He's so positive, you know, he's an ultimate professional. He will train 10 hours a day to get right. I think the public and the media, you know, the medical experts are saying, you know, it's not going to happen. The only guy who's going to drive it and put pressure on himself is him. And he's going to be massively motivated to do it.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's going to be the pressure he puts on himself to be fit. The pressure he feels to go to the World Cup and have a proper go at it. So there's that pressure, which is, I guess, the most important pressure because he's got to drive himself. But then there'll be pressure from interested parties. I mean, Western Province will want him back on the field. They want to see him get fit sooner rather than later. The Springboks, of course, Hanneke Meyer will be wanting him to be on the field as soon as he humanly possibly can be on the field. So there will be that kind of pressure, the desperate need to get out there. And in a World Cup year, you can multiply that and amplify that situation. So it's difficult.
You know, whether it's now pressure to come back, you know, is it really pressure? You know, you can't force an injury to get better. So either I will be ready or I won't. That's the reality of it. There's nothing in between. So the human body responds in that way. So that's not really pressure. It's life.
Rugby is about lots of things, and it's about your human spirit and loyalty for the team and for the jersey and discipline, and you know, Jean sort of epitomizes all of that. But rehab's a lonely process for the player, and he has suffered a loss.
John is a guy, I mean, the Springbok colours means a heck of a lot. Sorry, it seems to me the older I get, the more tears my tears are lying very shallow. But yeah, that's him. He loves playing for the Boks. And he's a team man.
You know, I've been very fortunate to play for the Springboks for a long time now. And I think all that everyone always wants is to be able to finish on your own terms. And, you know, I would like to do that. I would like to end it on a high. You know, I would like to go to the World Cup, but that for me is not going to be enough. I would like to go to the World Cup and I want to win the World Cup. And that's what I'm going to do. So I want to put myself in a position where I can make a positive contribution to the team, you know, and help with the success of that team. So, you know, like anything in life, it can go the other way and it cannot work out, and I might not make it back. But you know, this is my last shot. This is the last opportunity I get to really do something that I love and make the most of it. So, you know, I don't want to look back and say, you know, if only I did that, if only I worked harder. I want to make sure I get it right and I give it a shot.
As if all the challenges he has faced in his career were not enough, Jean de Villiers now faces one final race against time. Lying in agony on the Cardiff turf in November, he instinctively knew his prognosis, knew that it would take more courage, determination and resolve than he had ever mustered to make himself available for selection for the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Being the man that he is, he knows that there are no guarantees, not in fitness or selection. But there is nothing like a goal, a visible finish line to motivate him, to make the final chapter in his story a successful one. Although surrounded by a team of experts who share the goal with him, the journey will undoubtedly be a lonely one. The fuel, the desire, and the introspection coming from him and him alone. It is a journey rugby supporters will walk with him in spirit, and one which we will document every step of the way.